I refused to share my inheritance with my siblings because I was the only one who cared for our father. Hi, everyone. I'm new here, but I've been lurking for a while and reading other people's posts. I, 28 female, am in the middle of a really messy family situation, and I honestly don't know if I'm being selfish, cruel, or just finally standing up for myself. My dad passed away a few months ago, and now my siblings, 33M and 30F, and I are in a massive fight about his inheritance. The short version is my dad left everything to me. I refused to share it with them because I was the only one who actually took care of him when he got sick. But obviously, it's not that simple. Nothing with family ever is. I feel torn between anger, guilt, sadness, and a tiny bit of relief. I keep going over every moment in my head or replaying the past few years, trying to decide if I'm being rational or if I've become bitter and hard. So I want to lay it all out here and get some outside perspective. Growing up, my family wasn't terrible, but we weren't exactly the picture-perfect sitcom either. My dad was a quiet, hardworking man. He wasn't super affectionate, but when he did show love, you felt it deeply. My mom passed away when I was 14, so it was just the four of us after that. Dad, my older brother Jake, 33 now, my younger sister Lily, 30F, and me in the middle. Jake was always the golden child. He was athletic, popular, and got praised a lot because he was the firstborn son. Lily was the baby, the princess, and my dad admittedly spoiled her a bit after mom died because she was so young at the time. Me, I was kind of the quiet one, the responsible one. I got decent grades, I stayed out of trouble, and I helped out around the house. No one really paid attention to me unless they needed something done. I don't mean that in a super bitter way, it's just the truth. My role in the family has always been the reliable one. If the fridge broke, I figured out how to call the repair guy. If Lily had a meltdown about school, I was the one Dad asked to talk to her. If Jake wanted money for gas, Dad would sometimes say no, but then I'd lend him mine. I slid into the caretaker role really naturally, but it also made me feel invisible. Fast forward a few years, Jake moved out at 18 and barely looked back. He went to college a few states away, got a good job, and now he's married with two kids. Lily stayed closer, but she was always wrapped up in her social life, her boyfriends, and then later her own career. I don't judge them for living their lives, but the reality is that I was the one who stayed close to Dad. Even after I moved out into my own apartment, I saw him several times a week. I think part of it was guilt over Mom's death. I felt like I owed Dad something, like it was my job to keep him from being lonely. And part of it was just that we clicked more than my siblings did. He could be grumpy, but he'd light up when we'd watch old movies together or talk about books. It wasn't glamorous, but we had our little rituals. Looking back now, I think that bond is what set everything else in motion. Jake and Lily always assumed someone else, me, would deal with Dad, and Dad leaned on me because I was dependable. At the time, I didn't really question it. I just thought, well, this is family. This is what you do. Things started to change about 3 years ago. My dad's health took a slow but obvious downturn. It wasn't one dramatic event at first, more like 100 little red flags. He got tired more easily. He'd forget things he never used to. His knees hurt too much to walk long distances, and he'd complain about his chest sometimes, but brush it off as just old age. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, but then one day, he fainted while grocery shopping. A stranger called me because I was listed as his emergency contact. That was the moment everything shifted. We rushed him through doctors, specialists, tests. The verdict? A mix of heart disease and early stage dementia. Not the kind of thing you can just fix with a pill. It was a slow, cruel progression. He needed help remembering to take his medication, getting to appointments, paying bills. He couldn't drive safely anymore. He needed company because he'd get anxious when left alone. Guess who became the default caretaker? Yep, me. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved my dad, and I don't regret being there for him, but it wasn't exactly a group effort. I told Jape and Lily what was going on. Jake said he had his own family to care for, and while he did call sometimes, his version of helping was basically telling me, "You're doing such a good job. Thanks for being there." Lily swore she'd step up, but she'd come over once a month, maybe, and spend half the time scrolling on her phone. Meanwhile, I was doing everything, taking Dad to cardiology appointments, filling his weekly pill organizer, cooking meals so he'd eat more than crackers, cleaning his place, managing his finances, even handling his insurance. There were nights where I'd leave work, drive straight to his house, cook him dinner, and then go home exhausted, only to wake up early to check in again. And let me be clear, this wasn't just an hour or two here and there. This was my life. I had to turn down promotions at work because they required travel I couldn't commit to. My long-term boyfriend broke up with me partly because I always put Dad first. My social life basically evaporated. Friends stopped inviting me out because they could never go. I don't think my siblings ever fully grasped the weight of it. They'd say things like, "Thanks for handling it, you're just better at that stuff." As if I was some natural-born caretaker who enjoyed sacrificing my 20s to be a nurse, accountant, and maid rolled into one. The resentment started small, like a mosquito bite, but it grew. There were nights where I'd sit in my car outside Dad's house and just cry. Not because I didn't want to help him, but because I felt so abandoned. My siblings were living their lives while I was drowning in responsibility. And still, I told myself, this is family. This is what you do. One day they'll see. It's strange how you can spend years bracing for something, knowing it's inevitable, and still be completely shattered when it happens. That was me when my dad passed away.
The last few months were the hardest. His dementia got worse. He'd forget who I was sometimes, or he'd think I was my mom. Those moments cut deep. But there were also flashes of clarity that I clung to, like when he'd suddenly squeeze my hand and say, "You're my rock." Or when we'd watch an old Western movie and he'd make the same cheesy jokes he had my entire life. By the end, his body gave out before his mind fully did. Heart failure. The doctors had told us it was only a matter of time, but hearing the words, "there's nothing more we can do," was like a punch to the gut. I was there in the hospital holding his hand when he took his last breath. Jake wasn't there. He said he couldn't get a flight in time, even though Dad had been in the hospital for over a week. Lily showed up 2 days before, cried a lot, then left early because she said hospitals made her panic. I don't want to sound cruel, but the truth is, I was the one who stayed. I slept in that uncomfortable hospital chair. I held the nurses accountable. I was there when it mattered. Afterward, everything was a blur. Planning the funeral felt surreal. I picked out his suit, handled the obituary, coordinated with the funeral home. Jake showed up with his wife and kids and played the role of grieving son for everyone to see. Lily cried dramatically at the service and clung to people for comfort. And me? I was the one running around making sure the slideshow worked, that the flowers got delivered, that everyone had food afterward. I barely had time to cry. And maybe that's where my bitterness started to really harden. Because even in death, it felt like I was still the only one on duty. My siblings got to mourn, got to be comforted. I got to organize. But there was one moment I'll never forget. The night before the funeral, I was sitting alone in Dad's house, surrounded by all his things, feeling utterly drained. I opened his desk drawer to put away some papers, and I found a letter addressed to me. It wasn't long, just a few lines written in shaky handwriting. To my daughter, you gave me more than I ever could have asked for. You were there when no one else was. I want you to have everything, not because of the money, but because you earned it. Please don't feel guilty. Love, Dad. I sat there with tears streaming down my face, clutching that piece of paper. It's like he knew what was coming. And in that moment, I felt two things at once: the deepest love and the deepest dread. because I knew exactly how my siblings were going to react when they found out. A couple of weeks after the funeral, we had the meeting with Dad's lawyer. I went in feeling hollow, grief mixed with exhaustion, but also with that letter tucked carefully in my bag. I hadn't told Jake or Lily about it. It felt too personal, too sacred, like a message dressed for me. The three of us sat in this bland office with beige walls and a fake plant in the corner. The lawyer, a stiff older man with glasses, shuffled through papers and started reading the will. I swear I could feel the tension in the air before he even got to the important part. And then it happened. Dad left everything to me. His savings, his house, his car, even the old coin collection he kept locked in a box. All of it. The only line about Jake and Lily was that he trusted they understood his decision. The room went silent for a moment. I just sat there frozen because even though I knew from his letter, hearing it out loud felt surreal. A strange cocktail of emotions ran through me: shock, relief, guilt, vindication. Then Jake exploded. What the actual hell? This has to be a mistake. Dad would never cut us out like that. Lily's face turned red and blotchy. This is insane. Did you know about this? Did you talk him into it? I tried to speak calmly, though my voice was shaking. I didn't ask for this. Dad wrote the will himself. You know I was the one who... Jake cut me off and slammed his hand on the table. Don't even start with that. You think you're some kind of saint just because you lived nearby? You manipulated him when he was sick. That's elder abuse. I swear my jaw nearly hit the floor. Elder abuse? I was the one bathing him when he forgot how. I was the one sitting with him through doctor's visits. But in their eyes, none of that mattered. Lily chimed in, crying. We're his children too. You can't just take everything. That's not fair. Families share. That word, share, hit me like a slap. Where was all this concern about sharing when I begged them to help with hospital bills? When I asked them to cover for me so I could take a weekend off? Where was their sense of fairness then? I told them, quietly, but firmly, Dad made this decision. I didn't force him. And honestly, after everything, I think he was right. The room went ice cold. Jake stared at me like I'd turned into a stranger. Lily whispered, "You're disgusting," and stormed out in tears. The lawyer cleared his throat awkwardly, like he'd seen this 100 times before. But for me, it was like the final shattering of whatever fragile sibling bond we still had. That night, I went home and pulled out Dad's letter again. I read it over and over, trying to convince myself I wasn't a villain, trying to believe him when he said not to feel guilty. But the truth is, guilt and anger were eating me alive in equal measure. The days after the will reading were brutal. I thought maybe Jake and Lily just needed time to cool down, but instead everything got worse.
Jake called me the very next morning. He didn't even say hello, just launched right in. You're going to give us our share, right? This can't stand. I stayed quiet for a second, because part of me hoped he was joking. He wasn't. He started rattling off numbers. The house value, Dad's savings, even the car, as if he'd already done the math on what he thought he was owed. I finally said, Jake, it's not up for debate. Dad made his decision. He went silent for half a beat, then his voice turned sharp. You think you deserve everything just because you played nurse for a couple years? We're his kids too. You're being greedy and selfish. That word, selfish, nearly made me laugh, except I was too angry. Selfish? After years of giving up my weekends, my social life, my relationship, my career opportunities. Me? I tried to explain it calmly. I didn't just play nurse. I gave up years of my life for Dad while you two checked out. Dad saw that. He wanted to thank me. Jake wasn't having it. He said I was twisting things, that Dad had been too sick to know what he was signing. He even hinted at contesting the will. By the end of the call, I was shaking with rage. And then Lily chimed in, but in her own way. She didn't call.
She texted paragraphs of messages about how hurt she was, how I'd taken advantage of Dad, how I couldn't believe I'd put money above family. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Money above family? I was the one wiping Dad's drool off his chin when he couldn't feed himself anymore. I was the one who gave up nights out and vacations to sit with him through endless doctor's appointments. Where were they then? But Lily didn't stop at texts. She called mutual relatives, told them I'd stolen the inheritance, that I'd manipulated Dad in his final years. Suddenly, cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years were messaging me with concern, thinly veiled accusations disguised as sympathy. The final straw was when Jake showed up at Dad's house, my house now, when I just started sorting through Dad's things, trying to decide what to keep, when Jake barged in and demanded we divide stuff up right there. I told him no, calmly at first, then more firmly. But he wasn't listening. He stormed into the living room, grabbed Dad's old coin collection box, and said this was supposed to be mine anyway. I snapped. I yelled at him, really yelled, for the first time in my life. I told him he had no right, that he abandoned Dad, and that I wasn't going to let him take what Dad wanted me to have. My voice cracked, but I didn't back down. Jake just glared at me, muttered something about lawyers, and left. I sat on the couch afterward, shaking so badly I could barely breathe. I'd never felt so betrayed. Not just because of the inheritance, but because, in their eyes, none of my years of sacrifice mattered. They rewrote the story so they could see themselves as victims and me as the villain. That night, I sat in Dad's recliner, surrounded by his smell, his things, his silence, and I just cried until I couldn't anymore. I kept thinking, was this what he wanted? Did he imagine us tearing each other apart like this? But yet another part of me, the angry, raw part, whispered, no, this is exactly why he did it. He knew. After that blow-up with Jake, everything changed. It's like my siblings decided collectively that I was the enemy now. The phone stopped ringing, except for the occasional bitter text demanding my share or accusing me of dragging out Dad's memory for personal gain. Lily blocked me on social media altogether, then unblocked me just so she could post cryptic quotes about betrayal and snakes in the family. Subtle, right? Word spread through the family tree like wildfire. Suddenly, I wasn't the daughter who cared for her sick father for years. I was the greedy one who stole everything. Relatives I barely knew reached out with polite but pointed questions. Did your dad really cut Jake and Lily out? Are you sure that was fair? Even a family friend who'd watched me bring Dad to appointments had the nerve to say, well, you could have been more generous about it. Generous. That word made my blood boil. Because what no one seemed to understand was that the inheritance wasn't just money. It wasn't about greed. It was the only acknowledgement of what I poured into those years. All the sacrifices no one saw. The nights I went home and cried. The birthdays and weddings and vacations I missed. Dad saw it, and this was his way of saying, I noticed. I appreciate you. But instead of feeling validated, I just felt isolated. Friends tried to comfort me. One of my closest friends said, honestly, if they didn't help, they don't deserve a dime. Another reminded me that siblings often show their true colors after a parent dies. But late at night, when it was just me and the silence of Dad's house, the guilt crept in. What if I was punishing them by holding on to it all? What if I was justifying selfishness by leaning on my caregiving years as a shield? Would splitting things have bought peace? And then there was a practical side. The inheritance wasn't some huge fortune. It was enough to pay off my student loans, maybe buy a more reliable car, and keep Dad's house if I wanted to. For Jake and Lily, who already had their own careers and stability, it would have been a nice boost, but not life-changing. For me, though, it was a lifeline, a chance to breathe after years of suffocating responsibility. I tried to explain that once in a group text. I said, Dad left this to me because he knew what I gave up. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but this isn't just money. It's my future, the one I put on hold to take care of him.
Jake never replied. Lily sent back, "Wow, selfish to the end." So now here I am, months later in this weird limbo. I own my dad's house, but I don't feel at home in it. Every time I see the furniture or smell his old cologne, I feel both comforted and crushed. My siblings barely speak to me. Family gatherings are tense, if I'm even invited at all. And I'm left replaying everything in my head, wondering if I could have handled it differently. Wondering if Dad would be proud of me for standing my ground, or heartbroken that his kids can't even look at each other anymore. So now you know the whole messy story. My dad is gone, my siblings hate me, I have the inheritance, the house, the money, the little things he left behind. On paper, I guess I won, but honestly, most days it doesn't feel like winning. Sometimes I sit in Dad's recliner and hold his letter, and I feel this wave of peace, like he saw me, he understood, and he wanted to give me something back. And for a few moments, that's enough. But other times, the guilt gnaws at me. Not because I think I don't deserve it. Deep down, I know I do. I put in the time, the effort, the sacrifice. My siblings didn't. Still, I can't stop asking myself, would splitting it have been easier? Would giving them something, even just a token, have spared me all this family fallout? And then I get angry again. Why is it on me to buy peace with money when they couldn't buy me an afternoon off to rest when Dad was sick? Why is it my responsibility to smooth over their guilt by handing them a check? I feel like I'm stuck in this loop. Relief, guilt, anger, sadness, repeat. And I don't know how to break out of it. So that's why I'm here, telling strangers on the internet something I can't tell my own family. Was I wrong to refuse to share the inheritance? Should I have given them something anyway, even though they didn't lift a finger to help Dad? Am I being heartless? I feel terrible, but a part of me thinks I'm acting like a spoiled child by holding on so tightly. Another part of me thinks I'm finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of being the responsible one. Am I overreacting?